The United States national debt just crossed an incomprehensible milestone, $38 trillion. And since 2020, the government has been running a deficit of $1 to $2 trillion every single year. A deficit simply means the government is spending far more cash than it collects in taxes. Imagine a college freshman who just got their very first credit card, entirely detached from the concept of consequences. That is essentially the financial position of the world's strongest economy right now. Treating the national debt like an endless midlife crisis is a mathematical impossibility. This volume of spending requires constant borrowing, and eventually every dollar of that gap must be accounted for. When you look at a problem this massive, you usually hear the exact same silver bullet solution thrown around online: just cut foreign aid. This chart illustrates the total federal budget. $78 billion on foreign aid sounds massive until mapped against total expenditures, barely 1%. If cut to zero, the savings cover exactly 19 days of Social Security. By day 20, we're back to borrowing. Trying to balance the budget by trimming around the edges of foreign aid is a lot like trying to lose weight by switching from regular to Diet Coke while you're still eating 3 meals a day at McDonald's. It ignores the core of the diet. To figure out where the money is actually going, we need to divide all federal spending into 3 distinct buckets. First, there's mandatory spending, programs locked in by law. Second, discretionary spending, the items Congress actively votes on every year. And third, net interest. When we look at this bar chart of total government outlays, a startling picture emerges. Just 5 line items consume nearly 70% of the entire federal budget: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, national defense, and interest. Everything else is essentially pocket change. We can immediately cross net interest off our list of potential cuts. That is the non-negotiable interest we owe on the trillions we've already borrowed in the past. We can't vote our way out of paying it. By simple process of elimination, any genuine attempt to balance the budget forces us into a very uncomfortable corner. We have to look directly at those remaining 4 massive categories. Our first theoretical target is national defense. At roughly $850 billion, it eats up 13% of all federal spending. The math clearly shows we are overspending. The U.S. defense budget is larger than the next 10 countries combined. But politically, defense spending functions as a national emotional support blanket. With rising global tensions dominating the news cycle, no elected official wants to take the risk of cutting the military. Because politicians view the defense budget as an essential safety net during global instability, these cuts rarely gain real traction. This political stalemate shifts the entire weight of the deficit problem onto the even larger categories of mandatory spending. These final 3 programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, cost $3 trillion annually. They make up a staggering 44% of the yearly federal budget. Social Security is the largest single program in the country, and its trust fund is projected to be entirely insolvent by 2034. When that happens, the law states the system can only pay out what it takes in from current taxes, triggering an automatic, mandatory 20% cut to seniors' benefits overnight. But this system can be fixed through a few specific policy shifts. The first option is to eliminate the payroll tax cap. Right now, workers only owe Social Security taxes on the first $170,000 they earn. Removing that cap and taxing all income above that threshold would close nearly 3/4 of the funding shortfall. The second viable option is a benefit adjustment. We are currently mailing monthly Social Security checks to ultra-wealthy individuals who earn millions in dividends. Changing the rules so multimillionaires no longer receive taxpayer-funded retirement payouts would immediately ease the burden on the system. The math shows Social Security is solvable. It just requires an immense amount of political courage to enact policies that are guaranteed to anger very powerful people. Then we have Medicare, the health insurance program for seniors that costs over $850 billion annually. Its hospital trust fund is racing towards its own cliff, facing insolvency by 2033, which would force an automatic 11% cut in coverage. We could delay this by raising the Medicare payroll tax by just 1 percentage point. Alternatively, we could stop the bleeding from within the program itself. Current estimates show the government is set to overpay private Medicare Advantage plans by up to $2 trillion over the next decade. Reining in those payments would keep the system afloat. Finally, there is Medicaid, the state-federal partnership that covers low-income families, disabled adults, and seniors. Because it operates without a specific trust fund, it cannot technically go insolvent, but it is still bleeding billions. A significant portion of that financial drain comes from sheer administrative waste. Over 5% of all Medicaid spending is lost to improper payments, data errors, and fraud. Cracking down on these massive inefficiencies would immediately save tens of billions of dollars per year. Reforming these three massive healthcare and retirement giants would address the vast majority of the government's unfunded liabilities. The sheer scale of these programs makes them the primary drivers of the deficit and the most significant targets for long-term stability. So, what exactly happens if politicians decide that touching these programs is too risky and they choose to just keep borrowing the difference instead? Investors aren't foolish. As they watch a country borrow trillions with no coherent plan to fix its spiraling debt, they perceive a much higher risk of default. And to compensate for that risk, they will start demanding a higher return. That forces the interest rate at which the United States borrows to rise. And when the government's borrowing costs go up, your personal borrowing costs skyrocket. Mortgages, car loans, business loans, and credit card rates will all become drastically more expensive for the average citizen. Rising interest rates act as a slow-motion chokehold on the economy. Over time, the increased cost of debt gradually makes everyday life, from housing to basic credit, entirely unaffordable. There is no painless way out of this math problem. We are out of perfect solutions, leaving us with only painful trade-offs. The only question left is, which sacrifice are you willing to make to save the system?